So often we get a lot of good archetypes from the anime or manga. Salamangreats are one of the most relevant archetypes to come from Vrains, managing to still be relevant today, while we'll also be getting some pretty powerful stuff based off that one duel was a fish guy all the way back in Duel Monsters. However, at other times we get random little duels against side characters where they come up with a few cards that are so specific and bad that they'll never work in real life, and then they go and make those cards anyway. Today is April 1st, and honestly, I can't find a better archetype, if we can even call it that, to cover than Doll Monsters, aka the Princess Cologne Deck. It's the perfect storm of everything you don't want from an archetype. Firstly, they have no real shared name between their cards, making it hard to give them proper support, or even just finding the cards to make them work together. Secondly, their entire deal is that they work with normal monsters. Specifically, normal monsters with 0 attack or defense. Now, I know the occasional normal monster deck is at least usable. Zoo ships were fun, if inconsistent, and a lot of people really insist that Blue Eyes does work. However, this archetype basically rules out using them as beatsticks, or even really using the good normal monster tuners. And then thirdly, their cards love working with very specific other cards. Some of them want a Princess Cologne on the field, others interact specifically with Box of Friends. It's worse than Buster Blader basically having 3 archetypes within it. Either that, or they just refer to what you need in the absolute vaguest way possible. It's actually kind of funny to see how they go about it. They tell you to summon 2 normal monsters with 0 attack or defense, and then make them into Dark level 8s, before talking about XYZ monsters. All this to avoid just saying summon 2 doll monsters with different names and make a Zombiestein out of them. But it's fine since this vagueness actually plays to their strengths. You see, despite everything I've said about this deck so far, and despite it being my April Fool's deck of choice, they can actually make some okay boards. Rank 8s are some of the most powerful, with Draglubions, Dingirsies, and well, even Zombiestein running around. And so the fact that they can make those pretty easily is no joke. Also, their later support is, all things considered, fairly good. At least for what a deck like this could hope for. So what is the support, and what is the deck actually supposed to do? Well, the entire deck basically works off a 2-card combo. You'll need either Grandpa Demetto or a Box of Friends in your hand, and then a Doll Happiness as your second card. Doll Happiness searches the card you're missing before popping a Box of Friends in your hand, getting you the materials for a Princess Cologne, letting Demetto activate his effect and creating a rank 8 of your choice. Now searching both of those monsters isn't actually too hard, and if this combo worked with just those 2 it would basically be fine, but sadly Doll Happiness being a continuous spell means it's one of the hardest card types to search out. But why search what you can just draw? In order to make this combo as consistent as possible, I basically turned the entire rest of the deck into a draw engine, using a bunch of normal monster support to try and dig as deep as possible into your deck without using your normal summon, to hopefully get the 2-card combo and let the deck do the one thing that it does well. As you'll soon see in the replays, when the deck does work it's actually pretty cool, but let's first take a look at the deck itself before we get into that. Here it is. Not a lot of monsters, huh? And half of the ones we do play are normal monsters. Look, I promise that the deck can do some stuff sometimes. You can also go for less focus on the 2-card combo and play some cards that give you a bigger variety of plays, so I'll go over those options at the end, stick around for that. But to start out, run the Doll normal monsters at 3 each, which are Doll Monster Bear Bear and Doll Monster Miss Madchen. You probably could run other level 4 normal monsters with 0 attack or defense, but we might as well stick to the lore intended ones. You really do need both of these at 3, since you get through them very quickly during your combos, especially when you also bring stuff like Unexpected Die into the mix. Next we run 3 Grandpa Demetto and 3 Box of Friends. Grandpa Demetto basically always needs to be your normal summon, so do hold off from normal summoning anything else until you're absolutely sure you can't do the full combo. It's also the reason we don't run other strong normal summons like Rescue Rabbit, because they would just conflict with each other. This is the card that gives you a rank 8 monster, and if you do decide to keep it on the field, it also allows one of your rank 8s to inflict some burn. Box of Friends is meant to be destroyed in your hand by Doll Happiness to get out the materials for Princess Cologne, but in an absolute emergency, you can set it and let it be destroyed by your opponent to be able to play on your next turn instead. It's impractical, sure, but it's good to sort of have a backup plan. Next we run 2 Fortune Fairy Hikari. When drawn, it lets you summon Grandpa Demetto from your deck, so it's another way to get into that. You're drawing a ton in this deck, which is why we run it at 2. We don't want to start with it, but we do want a fairly good chance of drawing it later on. At worst, it's another rank 1 material, for which we do have a use, as you'll see soon. Finally, run 3 Ash Blossom just to give you another interruption. I guess you could run Effect Veiler instead in case you're worried about drawing multiple copies of it, but that's up to you. Either way, we just needed to fill up the deck. Now for the meat of the deck, the spells. The most important one is, of course, Doll Happiness, so we run it at 3. You really need to get to this card, so keep doing everything you can to draw more cards until you find it. It basically creates a Princess Cologne with normal monsters without using your normal summon, but it also gives you some protection which is sometimes relevant. Then in order to get to it, we run 3 Unexpected Die, 3 White Elephant's Gift, 3 Piri-Reis Map, and 3 Piercing the Darkness. Die gets a normal monster out, which can sometimes be useful, but is also a way of just having a normal monster on board for White Elephant's Gift, which can then send it to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. That means you won't have any monsters on the field once more, and since neither of these cards are hard once per turn, you can just do it again if you draw another pair of copies. Piri-Reis Map can search Demetto, and since he's your normal summon anyway, you don't need to worry about the restrictions on his effect. They're removed before they would ever be relevant, so you can search him as this with only your life points being halved as a consequence. Funnily enough, it can also search every other monster in your deck, but they're way less useful to search compared to Grandpa Demetto. Piercing the Darkness is mostly here to be another draw card, getting you another card when you summon a normal monster. It does also make your XYZ monsters that were summoned using normal monsters gain attack equal to whatever they were battling, so it's basically a continuous effect honest for your XYZers. Since Draglubion already can't be targeted, this makes him more or less impossible to remove by battle as well, so it's a fairly nice addition. Next are a bunch of one-offs with Upstart Goblin, 1 for 1, 1 Day of Peace, Monster Reborn, and Into the Void. Most of these are just draw spells to try and fill out your deck, but 1 for 1 gets you a Demetto on the field without your normal summon, occasionally letting you make another rank 4 monster for your end board, and Monster Reborn serves a similar purpose. Into the Void's downsides usually don't matter, but remember that Zombiestein needs to discard in order to negate, so don't make that as your rank 8 if you've used Into the Void. Finally, we run 3 Shade Brigandine. It's basically here to be a normal monster that we can get onto the field without our normal summon, which either helps you fuel the draw engine, or occasionally can be an extra XYZ material for a rank 4. It also triggers Piercing the Darkness, so it can get your hand going too, as well as of course being a good material for Time for the Future if you can't quite go full combo. So that's the main deck. Let's now look at the extra deck, which is basically a big XYZ toolbox. To start with the obvious stuff, you run a Zeus, and then the Utopic Draco package. They're not the easiest things to make in this deck, but you'll be happy to have them for when you can. Then comes our rank 8s. Zombiestein is a negate backed up with 4000 attack, which can target any card on your opponent's field, so it can even negate spells or traps that have been activated. Then there's Draglubion and the dragons that he can summon, with Hope Harbinger, Tachyon and Numeron Dragon. You could cut a Tachyon, but that does limit your options a little. Going for Draglubion into Hope Harbinger is usually one of your best plays, giving you a spell negate and a high attack monster that can sometimes be hard to get rid of. Numeron Dragon is more for going second plays, to try an ATK. We also run a Dingirsu for some removal while going second. Then we have our rank 4s. We start with Princess Cologne, of course, since she's necessary for the deck to work. Then it's just some good generic rank 4s. Tornado Dragon for back row removal, Abyss Dweller for the graveyard lock, and then a Redoer if you have extra materials and a Shade Brigandine. And then finally a Baguska, if all you can make is 1 rank 4. Finally, we also run an Ensemble Robin, since it's a generic rank 1 that you can make with Box of Friends and Grandpa Demetto, giving you 2 bounces during your turn. Plus, it can't be beaten over by battle, since Doll Happiness protects monsters with 0 attack or defense from being targeted by battle when you have a Princess Cologne on the field. This basically makes sure you'll be getting its effect off, so it's a pretty good use of those materials. Finally, I wanted to go over a few more options for the deck, in case you want to vary it up a bit. First up, if you don't like One Day of Peace or Into the Void, Link Apple is basically another upstart goblin, but was the downside that it might banish an important Xyz monster for your combo. Then you could choose to run Dollhouse, which basically lets you make a rank 6 if you have Cologne on the field, and both normal monsters in the graveyard with more copies in the deck. It's pretty clunky to use and doesn't even have much payoff, but if you do use it, Photon Strike Bouncer is probably the best generic rank 6 stat you can make, without changing your deck to make use of something like Beatrice. Overall, it's probably not worth it, but you can try it if you want. Then, if you want to try some Synchro Summoning, Natural Tune could be a good use of your spare normal monsters, letting you make some level 5 Synchros, or even sometimes some level 8 ones. It's a completely different direction for the deck, so I won't be doing that, but I thought I'd mention it in case you wanted to try. Finally, Symbols of Duty is a good way to use your normal monsters to be an extra monster reborn, hopefully stealing something strong from your opponent's graveyard. Maybe worth considering if you're going second. Anyway, that's the deck. Now let's take a look at some combos. Right, time for some combos. But first, if you've been enjoying the video so far, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. For this first replay, I wanted to show you that 2-card combo I've been talking about this whole time. There are a few variations, but this one is the most basic. You'll need either Grandpa Demetto or Box of Friends, and then Doll Happiness for this deck to work. Start by activating Doll Happiness, searching whichever of the 2 monsters you don't already have. Next, use its other effect to destroy Box of Friends, sending a normal monster to the graveyard in the process. Box of Friends will trigger in the graveyard, getting 2 more normal monsters out. Turn those into a Princess Cologne, who brings back the Box of Friends. Now you can normal summon Demetto, and use its effect to detach a material to summon 2 normal monsters as Dark level 8s. You can now turn both of your level 1 monsters into an Ensemble Robin, before doing the Draglubion combo to get yourself a Hope Harbinger on the field. You now have a Spell Negate, 2 very big monsters, and 2 bouncers from Ensemble, who's protected by Doll Happiness from being targeted by battle. In this second replay, I want to show you a different variant of the 2-card combo which, in some situations, could be preferable to the other combo. You'll basically be doing everything the same way as the first combo, and the requirements are the same too. However, you'll want to leave Demetto and Box of Friends on the field. This means that, when you use your level 8s to make a Zombiestein, instead of a Draglubion, you'll be getting a quick effect monster destruction on top of a negate from Zombiestein, as well as 2400 burn. Since Grandpa Demetto can't be targeted by battle, it doesn't even matter that it's just sitting there with 0 attack. For this third hand, we don't have everything we need, so we'll need to tap into our draw engine. We do that by starting with One Day of Peace to draw a card, before searching Box of Friends with Happiness. We can then activate Shade Brigandine to send it with Gift to draw 2. That will get us a Hikari, who can summon itself and then send itself to the graveyard to get a Grandpa Demetto. Now that we have full combo, we can use Happiness on the Box of Friends, getting the materials for Cologne, who can then get back Box. Demetto can then use his effect to get out the rank 8 materials, with which we make a Draglubion, but we don't activate it yet. That's because we can use 1-for-1 to get another Hikari, before overlaying the 3 level 1s into a 3 material Ensemble Robin for 3 extra bouncers. After that, we can just use Draglubion to make a Hope Harbinger, completing our board. Finally, here's a hand that ends on an even more powerful end board. Start with Piercing the Darkness, so that Unexpected Die draws us a card, which is Doll Happiness. Use it to get a Box of Friends, and then use its other effect on the box to get out the materials for Cologne. Then do everything else as usual, using your normal summon to get a Demetto on the field, and then using those to get a Draglubion, which you don't activate yet. Instead, we can use Shade Brigandine to get another level 4 on the field, which lets us make an Abyss Dweller, or any other rank 4 that isn't a Numbers. Those two allow us to make a Utopic Draco Future, before going into a 2-material Ensemble Robin. Finally, we make a Hope Harbinger as Draglubion, whose effect can redirect attacks towards itself, which is another way of protecting Ensemble Robin from attacks. We even have an extra monster zone open, so if we negate a monster with Utopic Draco Future, we'll be able to summon it back to our field. So that's the deck. Happy April Fools, everybody! I know it's mostly a joke deck, but if you decide to test it out anyway, tell me how that went. And while you're down there in the comments, don't forget to like and subscribe. Special thanks to my Tier 2 patrons Jason Moa and Violet Rain. The link to that is in the description. Thanks for watching!